Hi guys, it's Candace from Beacon Hill Books. I'm here today with a tag video called the Nonfiction Tag. I was tagged by Vanessa at Split Reads. Thank you so much for tagging me. And this was created by Maria at Read, Create, Repeat Homeschool. I'm sure you're all very familiar with this nonfiction November that's been going around, as well as this tag. And so I just really like to get to it. Question number 1. Nonfiction November is a great time to meet other nonfiction lovers. Give some shout out love to one of your favorite nonfiction booktubers. Well, one is impossible. It's so hard, and probably the big booktubers have already been mentioned, like, for instance, Olive, who started, one of the persons that started this November, Nonfiction November, and Maria. I have to say my go-to person for nonfiction reads is Vanessa. So she just reads the same type of nonfiction that I am most interested in. A lot of times, a lot of social issues. She's so widely read in everything in nonfiction. Also, Ashley at Climb the Stack. She's a pretty big booktuber. And so in terms of not as big booktubers, but still fairly large, Cheryl at CR Flames Fan. She reads a lot of historical nonfiction, which I really enjoy as well. So I just never know what she's going to pop up with from the library. I love seeing what she's got next. I have Jen at Remembered Reads. She reads a whole slew of different books. She just recently went on a brain binge, but every once in a while our interests will overlap, but I just feel more intellectual listening to her videos. And Liz at Book Learning, she's a great nonfiction reader. We have a lot of the same interests, including Abe Lincoln. And Richard at Richardson Reads. I really enjoy his videos. He's very widely read and has great recommendations. Why do you read nonfiction? Well, I really like to learn. I find that I probably was at school on a little bit of an autopilot. That's probably very typical for most kids, but I really love history and historical fiction, and so a lot of times when I read a book, a historical fiction book, and then I read, more about it after, or I Google it after, or there's a afterword and it says, well, some of this, we're smudging on the details a little bit, and it's like, well, then now I gotta go read a whole nother book to really be sure what happened. I just would rather just get it right from the source if I can. I still very much love historical fiction, but if a nonfiction book is done right, it's the best type of read that there is, I think. I really enjoy learning, and I do find that nonfiction and memoirs are some of my favorite audiobooks, which I've really come into listening to a lot of recently. And a lot of times, as people say, the truth is stranger than fiction, and there's some great stories out there. Number 3, so home. Where in your home do you read the most? I read the most on my couch, which is over there. It has the most comfortable spot, the most comfortable lighting. A lot of times I'll read while my husband watches TV, and then I'll read from my Kindle app on my phone before I fall asleep. It just makes my eyes tired, and so I like having those 2 avenues to read every day. Also, number 4, home. Give a nonfiction recommendation set in your home country. Well, the U.S. is a big country, so I really wanted to be as specific as I could. Well, recently I was inspired to look up more about Phineas Gage. If you guys watch Stranger Things 2, they mentioned this gentleman who was working with railroad spikes, and dynamite went off unexpectedly, and it went up through his head. And people say that his personality changed, but he lived. And so I have not read this yet, but it's only like 100 pages. It's supposed to be as a nonfiction book that young readers would like. I really want to read Phineas Gage, A Gruesome But True Story About Brain Science by John Fleischman. So I find that was pretty interesting. Number 5, Home. Which book on your 2017 nonfiction TBR are you most excited about home? And for that, Mayflower by Nathaniel Philbrick. Because of my schedule this month, I've actually taken to listening to this on audio instead, which I find is a great way to read a nonfiction book in tandem, do physical and audio. But this is the story of the Pilgrims that came over on the Mayflower and what ensues after with Plymouth and in New England with the Pilgrims and the Native Americans. As I have said in other posts, it actually surprised me how little there is to do about the Mayflower. But I definitely enjoyed this read. I'm about 30 minutes left in the book, and I'm going to keep this to read down the road because there's just so much detail that you miss in school and history class and things. It's, of course, quite gruesome details and things, but historical facts that we need to know and learn. So I really liked this. Number 6, love. What do you love to read the most in the nonfiction field? Well, like most people, I like to read things that interest me, so I'll usually go on some sort of a binge. And I really love history and historical figures. So a lot of the presidents I like to read about, political figures, a lot of authors I like to read about, and I like to read about artists. This year in particular, I've been reading a lot of memoirs from musicians, and I also love books about nature or animals. So basically a lot, and that's just probably the tip of the iceberg. But there's just so much to read. Number 7, love. Give a nonfiction recommendation related to the nonfiction love in the nonfiction challenge, and I picked Vincent and Theo, the Van Gogh brothers by Deborah Heiligman. I'm trying to keep pretty recent for some of these picks so that you can go back in my other videos and learn more about the book. But this Heiligman follows the letters between Vincent and his brother Theo. It was just amazing, the bond, the brotherly bond that these two had, particularly for survival and trying to make money, and for Vincent's mental health. It was almost like a transcendental love beyond their marriages, or Theo's wife. Vincent never married, but it was very astonishing and heartwarming. What love-related nonfiction recommendation are you most excited about reading? I would like to read Mr. and Mrs. Prince, How an Extraordinary 18th Century Family Moved Out of Slavery and Into Legend by Gretchen Holbrook Grezina. This takes place in the New England, but it obviously has to do with the slaves and the slaves who lived in the North and the South. But this particularly intrigued me because it has to do with them owning land in both Vermont and Massachusetts. So I was recommended this book by a coworker, and I really would like to get to it. Number 9, substance. Nonfiction is a great way to introduce us to people that inspire us to be better. Name a person of substance you loved reading about. I am going to say Elizabeth Peabody from the Peabody Sisters. This is the 3 women who ignited American romanticism. I guess romanticism is another way of saying transcendentalism, but Elizabeth Peabody was such a force in a time when women and females were not putting themselves out there intellectually, and she had no boundaries in terms of pushing herself to learn as much as she possibly could. So this kind of goes along with another question: what book would you recommend about the character? And I know you guys, if you watch my channel, are probably sick of hearing me talk about this book, but I was just so inspired and so impressed by Elizabeth Peabody. The other person that I've also raved about recently and on my channel is Abe Lincoln. This is The Team of Rivals by Doris, Kearns, Goodwin. These people just transcend their time. They're just amazing, and like, they don't act typically human. I don't know what to say. Like, I just was so impressed with Lincoln's character while reading this book, especially towards the end, once you get away from some of the discussions about all of his cabinet members, and it really focuses on more him and how he reacts and deals with people that he's working with and in the country. And I could read a million books about Abe Lincoln and still want to read more. Number 10. What book would you recommend to people that has a lot of substance in it? Child of the Dark by The Diary of Carolina Maria de Jesus. And I've also spoken about this a lot on my channel. This is about a woman who lives in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in the slums, and she writes in a diary every day, and it just talks about the depths of poverty and how it is to live there. Really powerful. She has 3 children that she's trying to take care of by herself, and yeah, this is just a short book. With afterward, it's under 200 pages. I just had never read about this part of the world before, and I really enjoyed learning more about her and the slums or favelas in Brazil. Number 11. What book related to the substance word are you most excited about on your nonfiction TBR? I already finished March book 3 of the whole series. That was a great recommendation by Vanessa. And I like books like March and Persepolis because it shows you nonfiction doesn't have to be this long, dense, boring novel. March was so impactful and powerful, and it told a great story, but in a way that was almost entertaining, and definitely that even kids could read. So I really enjoyed that book. Number 12, scholarship. Nonfiction can teach us a lot. What subjects and topics have you learned about because of your reading? Every book that I've mentioned so far. I mean, I didn't even know who Elizabeth Peabody was before this year, which I happened to find that book in a little free library, and it's become one of my favorite books of this year. Like, everything. But I would say, in particular, Read Around the World Book Club for this month, we're reading The Chernobyl Prayer by Svetlana Alexievich. So this is the cover that you guys are probably most used to seeing. This was the one that my library had. It's called Voices from Chernobyl, and it is translated by Keith Gesson. And, besides knowing that there was a nuclear reactor fire, I didn't know very much about Chernobyl, and I'm almost done with this book. You have to read it in little parts. I feel like it's just so sad, but these are stories we need to read, even though they're difficult subjects. So I wanted to say Chernobyl for sure. And another book that I have not gotten as far as I would like to, but I'm going to keep reading past November, is Shirley Jackson, A Rather Haunted Life by Ruth Franklin. This was actually one of my most anticipated reads to get to, but given just how things went, I haven't gotten to it as much as I want. But Shirley Jackson, I recently read we have always lived in the castle, and was blown away, like immediately intrigued. You know, when you have one of those book binges and then you have to Google them and read everything. And I picked up this, it's pretty highly regarded biography about Shirley Jackson. So I've learned about her parents and her husband so far. And boy, people are interesting. Scholarship, which book would you recommend that would teach somebody something well? So I'm going to say the J.D. Ocker books. He writes nonfiction books about sort of the, I don't want to say occult, but like ghost books. I just finished his book about Edgar Allan Poe, and he wrote one about Salem, Massachusetts. He writes in such a way, I mean, probably someone like a Ruth Franklin here would be like, how can you say we're in the same category? But it's just very easily digestible nonfiction and really entertaining books. And so therefore you learn a lot. He always has pictures of the sites and things he goes to, so I find that the visuals stay with me. And I just really think it's an easy way to learn. So I really do enjoy his books a lot. 14. What book related to scholarship are you most excited about reading for this nonfiction November? And as I already held up, I picked Shirley Jackson because Shirley Jackson was quite an intellectual. Got a job at Bennington College. I don't know if she worked there as well yet. I think she already had started writing, but I haven't gotten that far in the book. But the reviews on this were really good, and it has some pictures in it. It has deckled edges. It is quite hefty. I think this comes in at, well, I guess a lot of it are notes. So maybe 500 pages or so. So hopefully I can renew this again and catch up on it. Number 15, who do you tag? So really anyone I mentioned in this video, and anyone that hasn't done it yet that would like to. In particular, I'll mention Cheryl at Sierra Flames Fan, Mel at Mel's Bookland Adventures, Richard at Richardson Reads, Dee at Books and Quirks, Jess at Garden Scriptorium, Liz at Book Learning. And thank you guys all for watching. Please let me know if you have any thoughts about any of the books I mentioned, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.